All right, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It being 6:02, I will declare the Ordinary Council meeting of the Shire of Capel, February 2023 meeting open. We wish to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land we are meeting on, the Wadani people. We wish to acknowledge and respect their continuing connection to the land, waters and community. We pay our respects to all members of the Aboriginal communities and their culture, and to elders past and present, their descendants who are with us today, and those who will follow in their footsteps. Record of attendance, we have 8 councillors in attendance tonight. Councillor Clues is absent. I'd also just like to acknowledge Cassandra Armstrong, the branch manager of Bendigo Bank Capel, in the audience tonight as well. There is no response to previous public questions taken on notice, as we now move to public question time. I have one question on notice. Where have I put that? From Mr. Mike Norton of Boynup.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A rhetorical question, I guess. Could the livestock producers, WA farmers, have an update regarding the signing of the contractual arrangements for the Boynup sale yards with Walser? And I guess if so, also have there been any indications regarding the planned upgrades to the current site and what they may be?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Norton, for the question. The lease between the Shire and Walser has been signed by the Shire and the Minister for Lands, as well as Elders. The lease is currently with the Nutrien representatives in Melbourne. There was a significant delay in the authorised representatives from Elders being able to execute their part of the agreement due to the holiday period and the requirement for wet signatures. Nutrien have advised that the agreement will be fully executed by the end of this week, and then will urgently transport the lease back to the Shire for registering. As to your second question, there are several important tasks underway that will enable the submission of a development application. This includes geotechnical assessment of the ground where the shade structure footings will be installed to ensure engineering compliance, negotiations with and gaining consent from the Public Transport Authority regarding the capital upgrade infrastructure that will be constructed within their lease area, applications for the management of on-site water, effluent and waste, and groundwater licensing. The timing of the submission of a development application to the Shire of Capel for the upgrades remains heavily reliant on Walser being able to satisfy and obtained consent from the other relevant authorities, the PTA and the Department of Planning, Lands and Heritage, about the building infrastructure within the lease areas respective to those two organisations.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Pretty straightforward.
Thank you, Mr. Norton. Are there any further public questions? No? All right, I'll move along to item 5, applications for leave of absence. Are there any applications? No? Oh, sorry. Was there an application for any leave? Councillor McClure, you? No? All right. All right, declarations of interest. I have 3 this evening. The first one from Councillor Rosina Mogg regarding item 14.3, a financial interest. The second from Councillor Sebastian Sciano, item 15.4, the 2023-22 Minor Community Grants Scheme. That is impartiality interest. And from Councillor Cara Andrew on item 20.1, impartiality interest. All right, you can declare that at the item, Councillor. If you could fill out the form as well, that'd be great. Item 7, notice of items to be discussed behind closed doors is one item, 20.1, Code of Conduct Complaint. Confirmation of the minutes, 8.1, the ordinary meeting of the Council, the 25th of January 2023. Is there a mover for those minutes? Councillor McCleary. Is there a seconder? Councillor Dillon. Does the mover wish to speak on those minutes? Seconder. Is there any discussion on them? Nope, I'll put that item to the vote. Those in favour? That's carried unanimous. Announcements by the presiding person. We have two this evening. It is with great sadness to share that former councillor Brian Peace has passed away, surrounded by family after a short battle with cancer. Brian served 4 years from 2003 to 2007 on the Shire of Capel, and more recently was the Shire President at the Shire of Donnybrook-Balingup between 2017 and 2021. Amongst many other public service roles, Brian was a board member of the South West Development Commission and was their longest serving member. He was on the Edith Cowan University Board, the South West Catchment Council and the Kings Park Board. Brian cherished the opportunity to influence and guide public sector services and always loved a good debate. Brian leaves behind his beloved wife Lucille, his 2 daughters and multiple grandchildren. The second announcement from the Deputy President.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would also like to share my sadness for the passing of Clyde Carruthers last week. After a career as an accountant, Clyde opened the Corroy's Tea Rooms, now Corroy's Kitchen, in the 1980s, during a time when the highway used to pass through town. He later opened Capel Videos, just across from the Shire admin buildings, operating from the front of his home here on the main street in Capel. Clyde served as Treasurer of the Capel Fest Committee, Secretary and Treasurer of the Capel Chamber of Commerce, and of course leaves behind his dearly beloved wife, Bev. Not only was Clyde a dedicated and active part of our town, he was also my first boss. In 2012, I started my first ever job as cashier at Capel Videos, where I worked with Clyde for 3 years. Rest in peace, Clyde.
Item 10, petitions, deputations and presentations. There are none this evening. There are no motions of which previous notice has been given, and there are no questions of which previous notice has been given. So we now move on to section 13, Chief Executive Officer Reports. 13.1, Local Government Reform Requirements. Is there a mover for that recommendation? Councillor McCleary. Is there a seconder? Councillor Sciano. Councillor McCleary.
Thank you, Mr. President. There's some interesting things in this report, and I'll put it out to the people to have the conversation and close out at the end.
The Deputy President.
Thank you, Mr. President. Wish to move an amendment to remove point 3 from the officer's recommendation.
All right, amendment to omit point 3.
And subsequently renumber item 4 to item 3.
All right, is there a seconder for that motion? Councillor Tarantroy. The Deputy President.
Thank you, Mr. President. While I respect the intent to begin a consultation process around the reduction of councillor numbers, I have always had a position on this in which we, as a regional council, is vital to have voices on council. It's not a requirement of us under this reform to change our councillor numbers. In fact, we fit within where we should be for the band that we currently are, and that could be a discussion in the future depending on where we move. But for the time being, we have a group of 9 dedicated people from diverse corners of our local government. From a savings perspective, which is some of the arguments I've heard, there is very marginal savings to be made. And then I've also heard arguments that by reducing numbers, you could increase councillor allowances. Well, I've never support increasing councillor allowances either. So with that, I just want to take this off the table now. I don't want to be having a discussion until the status of this local government changes, whatever far forward in the future that is. Could be tomorrow, could be 5, 10 years away. However, I'm taking it off the table tonight, and I hope my fellow councillors support that.
Councillor Tarrant-Troy.
Yes, I also support this amendment because I feel for the same reasons we need diversity on council, and if you reduce councillor numbers, which isn't a requirement of the Act as it stands for our band, you're going to reduce diversity on the council and you're going to restrict the people that can do this role. As far as council allowances go, I'm a little bit different from Councillor Shishano in the fact that Capel Shire councillors only receive 50% of the allocated allowances. This was a decision, I think, back in 2017, if I remember, but anyway, that date may not be quite right. But it was a decision of council and I support that decision. However, I would like to look at that being reviewed in future, because by reducing the amount of the allowances, because what councillors do is not a paid position, it's not a wage, a living wage. We're actually reducing opportunity for people like single parents who have limited income, who can't afford not to get some sort of allowance to become councillors. And wouldn't it be great to have a single parent who knows the current issues of families on council? And this is why I'm so for diversity on council, not reducing the number of councillors, because I think it's such a huge job and many people in the community don't understand how much work is involved as a councillor. And if we worked out, I think Councillor Dillon and I discussed it once, we're not even getting $1 an hour for all the work we do with the allowances. And as I said, they're only allowance. So yeah, I urge my fellow councillors to support the amendment. Thank you.
Are there any speakers against the amendment? Councillor Noonan.
Thank you, Mr. President, and I thank Councillor Siano and Tarrant-Troy for putting the amendment up. However, I would vote against it and vote in fact to retain point 3. Point 3, I'll read it for the people online, requests the CEO to commence public consultation for a period of 6 weeks for the consideration of reducing elected member representation and report the findings back to the council. Now, I think that we are beholden to consult the community on any issue. I would be open to changing the wording of point 3 to, and so I'd like to foreshadow an alternative point 3 to reduce the period of consultation from 6 to 4 weeks, and to take out the word reducing, or the term reducing, so to look at the numbers, so that it will give, so that it won't preempt any decision that community members make. But I think it's really, really important that we consult members of the community. I think it's, I find it very jarring to have any organisation say that discussion's off the table, that we're not interested in getting the community's response for that. And I don't think that that's our remit. I don't think that's our business. I think that this is an issue that the community should have a say in, and it may well be that the community comes back and says, yes, we're very happy with 9 councillors. They might come back and say, we would like even more. You know, and I think that it's a dangerous precedent that we set, where we have reports coming from the state government announcing key reforms and legislation, and where we say, yeah, well, we're not even going to let the people talk about that. So that's why I'll be voting against this recommendation and foreshadowing an alternative to change the wording of point 3.
Thank you, Councillor Noonan. Just for a point of clarification, If this amendment is lost, the foreshadowed motion that you've suggested might technically not be able to occur. You'd have to move that as an individual amendment. Because of foreshadowing at this point, you'd be repeating a lot of the amendment as is anyway, apart from the point 3. So it'd be better to move as an amendment following decision on this. Right. Are there any speakers in favour of the amendment? Councillor Dillon.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thanks to all my fellow councillors for the debate. It's good to hear. I am in favour of the amendment and removing point 3. One thing that probably hasn't been canvassed in the chamber tonight is the fact that the time frame, while Councillor Noonan did talk about shortening it down, let's play hypothetical. We put it out to public consultation, even if it was for 4 weeks. We are looking at a round of local government elections coming up fairly soon. Let's imagine that they would like a reduction in numbers. What are we going to do in this current local government cycle? There would be a lot of stuff to be done behind the scenes to make that occur. If we couldn't make that occur, I imagine our residents and ratepayers wouldn't be very happy. I'm not saying that we don't tackle it at some point in time. I just think where we're at in our current local government cycle, maybe we should mothball it for the time being, and if the council has the appetite for it, we can certainly look at it after the local government elections later this year. Thank you.
Are there any other speakers for or against the item? Councillor Andrew.
Thank you. I wasn't really sure how I was going to vote on this, but I think Councillor Dillon has swayed me. I agree with Councillor Noonan that phrasing it the way that it's point 3 is phrased about specifically reducing elected member representation, I think pre-states the outcome. It should have been, I would have liked to have seen it worded more neutrally. And I agree with Councillor Dillon that really this isn't effective at this point in time. If they want to reduce council down to only 6 members, then we have a problem in a couple of months, and then because we can't just run an election and only fill 2 spots, to drop the numbers down to 6 and then have 4 and 2, and it all becomes really messy. So what I would actually prefer, and I'm happy to drop this off tonight, but what I would prefer when probably realistically once a new council is voted in October, after that period we have a conversation with our residents, not just on elected member numbers, but also the remuneration and the allowances, but actually not pose it as a simple one-liner question. When we discussed this at the round table on Wednesday, we discussed quite in depth that the number of committees that we have and that we have councillor representatives on, the number of community meetings that we attend, the community events, even just the briefings and the workshops and the everything. It's a lot even for 9 people to get through. If you then cut those numbers down to 6 or 5, and there's probably people that already think that we do a pretty crap job, but if you reduce our numbers down to 5 or 6 and not have the whole picture of the hours that we actually put in, we aren't just rocking up for a 3-hour meeting once a month. The hours that go in to this role is phenomenal and far beyond what I ever expected, to be honest. And that's why I'd like to have a whole community conversation. And you know what they say, you pay peanuts, you end up with monkeys. But also there's the diversity issue when it comes to numbers, but also the allowance system and enabling people to actually cut down on work hours and fully commit to being a counsellor. I think that's quite a worthwhile cause. And to be honest, right now the allowance wouldn't allow me to do that. And I don't think it would allow many of us to actually do that and be able to commit more hours as a counsellor. And I think we need those people on the council that don't work as many hours, that aren't full-time workers, and then they do have the time to go to meetings and that happen during the day and all that kind of stuff. I know we probably don't acknowledge it, but we have a couple of counsellors that don't work full-time, and they definitely pick up the 9 to 5 slack that some of us just can't commit to on a regular basis, and that role that they fulfill for the rest of us is invaluable, and it often goes unrecognised. So I will be voting in favour of Councillor Sciano's amendment tonight.
Are there any other speakers to the item? No? I suppose my contribution. I came to this meeting to fully endorse that recommendation there. I think we should be going to that consultation, we should be having that discussion. But that 100% backing just went to 50.1, thanks to Councillor Andrew just then, because that was some very interesting points there that really made me rethink. And I'm flip-flopping either side of that now. Because there is a lot of information that I think if we're going to do proper consultation on it, we really need to be correct and factual about really what this position does entail and the commitment that it does take. And Councillor Andrew is right, there are those in this chamber who have a lot more availability and can go to a lot more things than the rest of us. We all try our best, but you just can't be everywhere. So I really don't know where my hand's going to go tonight. I think I'll have to leave it up till the actual point. But I still think it is a discussion we need to have. And at the end of the day, you know, if we did have the discussion with the community before this election, it's only just to see what they think about it. If it's not practical to do it this election swing, then we can hold it over to the next or the one after that. But yeah, I really don't know where I'm going to end up. So, are there any other speakers to the item? Does the mover wish to close?
To be clear, to me, this is not about remuneration. It's not about salaries. It's not about savings, and to which there is little to none. This is purely, to me, about representation. And the exact words in item 3 are reducing elected member representation. We go into a political climate in Western Australia over the next 2 years where we very likely may never have a local upper house member in Parliament, where local government councillors are the closest form of politicians to the people in their districts. Representation is vital for our communities. And while we may be a faster growing regional area than maybe some of our central Murchison, Pilbara, Kimberley zones, where you've got 9 councillors stretched over a country the size of a space the size of a European country, our representation is vital. We have diverse communities. We need to provide opportunity for diverse people in scale. 9 is not unruly. I'm not open to that discussion. I'm here to represent the community, and I want them to have as much representation as possible. I very much agree with the sentiments of Councillor Noonan and Councillor Andrew around the question that is posed, and fully respect and actually think there is genuine consideration to be given around how consultation at a broader space around our roles as councillors and what the community has expectations of us is. And I think that's a great discussion to have. But tonight, let me be clear, for me it is about representation. And that's why I really hope that council can support me and support the amendment.
All right, I'll put that on to the vote. Those in favour? And those against? And that's carried 6-2. That becomes the substantive motion. Are there any speakers against the motion? Speakers for? Councillor Noonan?
Thank you, Mr. President. Could I, even though it may well prove redundant, propose an alternative wording for point 3, reinstate point 3 with an alternative wording as an amendment. As was foreshadowed.
Yeah, you'll need to foreshadow that one, councillor, because that would go against the decision that was made regarding the amendment to remove it. So you'll need to foreshadow that as part of a new motion, and this one would need to fail.
Okay. Yes. Yeah, I'd like to foreshadow that on the failure of this motion before us. And can I give you the wording?
Yeah,
of
so
that
you're foreshadowing the initial officer's recommendation with changes to point 3.
Yeah, and
Yep.
those changes would be to reduce the public consultation period to 4 weeks instead of 6 weeks, and to simply take out the word reducing, and in fact to install the words and remuneration after representation, so that it would read, requests the Chief Executive Officer commence public consultation for a period of 4 weeks for the consideration of elected member representation and remuneration, elected member representation numbers and remuneration, and report the findings back to council.
All right, we'll just get that on the board, councillor. Is that your foreshadowed motion there?
Yes.
The
yes.
point 4 has shifted down, has it? Yep. All right. That's your foreshadowed motion, councillor?
Yes.
Right.
Yep, thank you.
Do you still have the call? Did you wish to speak to the substantive motion?
Only to request or to say that I won't be voting for the motion as is, and that I would hope that fellow councillors would consider the foreshadowed motion. Thank you.
Are there any other speakers to the item? Councillor McCleary, do you wish to close?
Thank you, Mr. President. Interesting conversations that we had, and I too was thinking of keeping number 3 in there, but listening around the table and the conversations, it putting into the pictures, if you wrote this as a position description of being on council in the full text, it would probably give a better understanding of what the role is and what we do. The other thing that's very important is 9 of us around the table and we share a workload, and that was also raised during the debate. And that's quite important because there are quite a few committees, and I know I miss a few of the meetings myself, but that's good that we've got the numbers that we have. I do remember in the distant past when I was on council, we had one election where there weren't enough candidates to actually have an election, and it got in that way. I also am aware in the previous council there was only 8 members for quite a substantial time. I'm not sure how it ran that way because I wasn't on. And the people around the table that have commented and wanted, and it's sticking with the numbers, indicate that that probably wasn't the best answer. I think we're probably a little bit premature in this election to go down that path, but I'm happy with the decision and where it's heading, and I'll be voting for this motion.
I'll put that item to the vote. Those in favour of the motion? Those against? And that's carried 6-2. 13.2, Committee of Council Minutes. Is there a mover for those minutes? Councillor Mogg. A seconder? Councillor McCleary. Councillor Mogg? No? Councillor McCleary. Is there any discussion on those minutes? No? Nothing further to add, Councillor Mogg? No? I'll put that item to the vote. Those in favour? And that's carried unanimous. Section 14, Infrastructure and Development Reports. Item 14.1, the review of health policies. So I have a revocation, no, it's just a rescind motion, sorry. All right, is there a mover for that officer's recommendation? Councillor McCleary. Is there a seconder? Councillor Sciano. Councillor McCleary.
Thank you, Mr. President. It's always good to remove a few policies when there's a duplication in the system, and it makes total sense for the officer's recommendation to remove these policies and rely on the legislation that's available to control those and not double up in some of the other things which was written into the item. Yeah, I'll be voting for this motion.
The Deputy President.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'll just add as well that when you rescind these policies and you return to using the legislation as your as the driver behind decision making, you're going to end up with more continuity between your local governments and meet expectations, rather than potentially having these small little things that pop up here and there that have come through the local government system as these policies develop and review over time. So, you know, as a punter, particularly around the caravan parks and the park homes, you know what you're getting is what's in the legislation.
Are there any speakers for or against the item? Councillor McCleary, do you wish to close? Nope, I'll put that item to the vote. Those in favour? And that's carried unanimous. 14.2, Tender 22/16, Cleaning of the Shire Public Toilets. Is there a mover for that recommendation? Councillor Dillon. Seconded. Councillor Mogg. Councillor Dillon.
Thank you, Mr. President. Not much to say on this, other than I'm led to believe it's a fairly, a very competitive contract, and we're getting pretty good value. Of course, no one wants to use unclean public facilities, so this pretty much stands to reason that we accept the officer's recommendation.
Councillor Mogg.
Thank you, Mr. President. I reserve my right to speak. Thank you.
Sure. Are there any speakers for or against the item? Councillor Noonan.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would just like to make the comment, and I apologise for the terrible pun, that I hope that we are not seeing a race to the bottom here. There was a significant difference between the two tenders that were presented, and it concerns me that that the amount of work involved, you know, to be competitive, one of the ways that private companies will do that is by paying the minimum wage, and also by extending the amount of work that's expected to be done within a given hour or a given period of time, to the point where it makes life and work life in particular very difficult for people who are in a situation where they're doing these difficult jobs, arguably fairly unpleasant jobs. Cleaning is never much fun. Cleaning public toilets is not necessarily a lot of fun. It's a very important job, something that has to be done, but it worries me. It genuinely worries me that that the expectation will be put on a member of the workforce, possibly a member of our community here in Capel, Capel Shire. And I know that this is not a decision that it's not a decision, or it's not a point that it's a commercial decision that the company makes. But I would just hope that perhaps in future tenders and evaluation of future tenders, that we also perhaps look at the possibility of including a basic level of services and expectations, so that we provide what we would consider a reasonable workload time frame, so that tenderers have that within the scope, so that that they can't undercut or agree to do things with an unrealistic and then place unrealistic expectations on their employees. And that's, having said all that, I'm certainly not casting any aspersions on the tenderers, but that's from lived experience. My first job as a 13-year-old was cleaning the school toilets across the road. At 13, I helped my mum do it for the princely sum of, I think it was $5 a week, which was actually pretty good money back then. And some would say that I haven't really progressed very far beyond that. However, I'm concerned about how we pay people who do the tough jobs. Yeah. Thank you.
All right. Are there any other speakers on the item? Councillor Terrentroy.
Yes, well, I understand Councillor Noonan's sentiments on wages. However, from lived experience as an industrial cleaner when I was in my mid-20s, we are protected in Australia by an award system, and even private companies have to pay the award wages. The thing I like about this cleaning contract is that, yes, it saves our residents money, because if it saves the Shire money, it saves residents. It also includes graffiti removal and additional cleaning as required in accordance with the pricing schedule that was submitted with the tender. So I'll be voting for this one, and I have full confidence in the awards system that we have in Australia for fair payment of wages. And there are ways that you can go through and if an employee is not being paid fairly, they can go through the correct channels to get that address, and then if they're not satisfied, then they can still go to the Ombudsman. So I'm confident that the systems that we have in Australia are not third world. Thank you.
Are there any other speakers on the item? Councillor Andrew.
Thank you. I actually share some of Councillor Noonan's concerns. Not that employees would be paid below what they're entitled to, but maybe not. And it's very, very hard to find workers at the moment. And I think for there to be such a discrepancy in the tender, I have a couple of concerns. You can either spend 10 minutes cleaning a toilet, or you can spend an hour cleaning a toilet. And the difference is going to be very different. And I'm concerned, number one, if you're paying just minimum wage, then you're probably going to struggle to get workers, and then whether or not you can actually fulfill the contract. But my second concern is the level of cleanliness or the level of work that you're going to get. For the discrepancy, I feel like there's going to be a massive workload or a massive push to get through those daily cleans quickly, rather than actually spending the adequate time to actually do a job, which is the expectation of our residents. And that's why I would have preferred the tender, I guess, process or documents not to state which toilets are getting cleaned daily or Monday, Wednesday, Friday, but actually put a time on them, because that's where the cost is going to come from. It's your employment hours per week. So you can employ 2 people to do the same job and do something every single day. I may spend 10 minutes. Ashley may do a really good job and spend an hour, and his tender's going to come in 4 times mine, but he's going to do a better job. So I'm not sure that it's just about price. We should be taking everything into consideration, and unfortunately I'm just not comfortable with this motion tonight.
Are there any other speakers on the item? I suppose just the comments I have, I think it's definitely valid concerns that my fellow councillors have regarding it. But I suppose just reviewing the previous contractor who did this service, this one before us tonight is a 7% increase based on their price, which began in July 2021. So a year and a half ago, and it's a 7% increase. So we had that service for that year and a half, and I don't recall too many issues with the public toilets. Their state of cleanliness and graffiti was removed as required. Any additionals were invoiced to the Shire. So I think this company has tendered, at I suppose a comparative level to the previous contractor. So I take that as a little bit of comfort, and probably have a little bit of concern regarding why the other one is so much more than the 2 previous contractors. All right, Councillor Andrew, question?
It is a question. So this contract is 7% of an increase on the previous one, but the previous one, from my understanding, didn't include graffiti removal. We got invoiced for that separately. This includes graffiti removal, is my understanding. We're not going to be invoiced for that separately. Is that correct?
The Director of Infrastructure and Development.
The terms of this contract are the same as the last one, so the graffiti and any additional cleans that will be required as part of this contract will always be invoiced separately.
Is there any further discussion on the item? Councillor Dillon, do you wish to close?
Thank you, Mr. President. Look, I'd like to acknowledge the arguments of both Councillor Noonan and Councillor Andrew, both absolutely valid. I suppose this is where it probably comes down to having a bit of trust in our director and their staff and the processes they go through to determine what ultimately comes before us at council. And I believe that we should, probably one point I'd like to make is, and it's been mentioned already, the discrepancy in the pricing. If it was closer together, perhaps we'd have a bit more of an argument, but I do think we need to be frugal and responsible with our residents' money. In saying that, I do take on board Councillor Andrew and Councillor Noonan's points. However, I believe we should just put the motion, and I recommend that we follow the officer's recommendation.
Put that item to the vote. Those in favour? And that's carried unanimous. Yeah. Unanimous, yep. All right, item 14.3, tender 2301, disposal of the Jallorup Volunteer Bushfire Brigade. Councillor Mogg has declared a financial interest in the item and has left the room. All right, is there a mover for that officer's recommendation? Councillor McCleary. Is there a seconder? Councillor Sciano. Councillor McCleary.
Thank you, Mr. President. Yeah, look, it's about time we got rid of this building. It's good to see that there's a bit of competition in it. Yeah, look, quite happy with the officer's recommendation.
The Deputy President.
No, nothing to add.
Is there any discussion for or against the item? No. Councillor McCleary, do you wish to close? I'll put that item to the vote. Those in favour? And that's carried unanimous. 7. We'll just wait for Councillor Mogg to return to the room. Item 14.4, tender 22/14, the Jallorup Bushfire Brigade building construction. Is there a mover for that item? Councillor Sciano, a seconder. Councillor Noonan. The Deputy President.
To note, I am moving an alternative recommendation, which is that Council accepts the tender from Devlin, Australia, for the tender 22-14 Jallorup Volunteer Bushfire Brigade building construction for $1,743,516.50, including GST. If I've got that correct.
Is the seconder... Yep. All right. You have the call.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just for those following on at home, the reason for the alternative motion is that the preferred tenderer, BGC Construction, has given formal notice to the Shire of their intention to withdraw from both the tender process and the project, and therefore, by doing this, Council will be able to give consideration to the second-ranked tenderer, Devlin, Australia.
Councillor Noonan.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, Councillor Sciano, for moving that alternative motion. Yes, the community, firefighting community, is certainly looking forward to having this new building, this new facility built. So I'm very pleased to see that we had a good competitive field of people interested in building it, and I'm sure that this will be greeted very, very warmly, once again, forgive the pun, by the bush firefighting community. Thank you.
Are there any speakers against the item? Speakers for? No. Does the Deputy President wish to close?
I'll just add, the assessment panel felt that both contractors demonstrated a high degree of confidence in their ability to complete the project. There is some price difference between the two, but it is an unfortunate circumstance that we end up in where the preferred tenderer has chosen to formally give notice that they intend to withdraw, and I think the option that we still have on the table is able to suffice.
I'll put that item to the vote. Those in favour? And that's carried unanimous. Item 14.5, tender 22 2024/07 Hasties Road curbing and drainage budget variation. Is there a mover for that item? Councillor McCleary. Is there a seconder? Councillor Noonan. Councillor McCleary.
Thank you, Mr. President. This additional work has come back to us because of decisions by council to bring variations back of a certain value, so it's good that we get to have a conversation about the variation in the first place. The variation involves fixing up curbing and car park in the Jalora car park area, which my understanding from conversation with staff is that's quite necessary, and it was unforeseen at the time of the contract letting. So I'm in favour of this motion.
Councillor Noonan.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, Councillor McCleary, for moving the motion. Yep, the variation is, I think, reasonable. They've found sometimes you don't know what you're facing until you take the covers off, and that's the case with this project. So it's an understandable requirement to complete the project well, that extra work needs to be undertaken. So I also support the officer's recommendation for the variation.
Are there any other speakers for or against the item? Does the mover wish to close? I'll put the item to the vote. Those in favour? And that's carried unanimous. 14.6, the nomination of new road names and closure of local roads for the Bunbury Outer Ring Road. Is there a mover for that recommendation? Councillor Tarantroy. A seconder? Councillor Dillon. Councillor Tarantroy.
Basically, I'm just want to say that it's really important that the community was consulted, and the name for one of the streets which the community wanted wasn't able to be delivered because Landgate came back and said they couldn't have that, and Main Roads supported that we have Grevillea as the road name. I understand that it'll affect, having Grevillea will affect less homes along that stretch having to be renumbered, which is why the council has decided to go with the recommendation to go with Grevillea. Thank you.
Councillor Dillon.
Thank you, Mr. President. I largely echo what Councillor Tarantroy has said across the chamber. Just for some affected residents, and unfortunately the fact is there'll always be some unhappy people, and I wish that weren't the case, but in particular in regard to Callinup, I think it's important that a lot of our residents along that stretch know that Landgate wouldn't allow the Capel Shire's preference to happen. So unfortunately we're not the gatekeepers on a lot of these things, and I think our Shire staff have done a good thing flying the flag. Unfortunately, certain recommendations that we wanted were kiboshed, and I just think it's important that maybe some unhappy residents understand that our hands are a bit tied on that level, and we don't get the ultimate final say. But look, ultimately I believe we should just proceed with the item as presented and vote on it tonight.
Are there any speakers against that item? Councillor Mogg.
Thank you, Mr. President. I don't support it for the fact that I support the residents, the people that I represent in the Shire. It should remain Callinup. It has a significant meaning, and I'm hoping Indigenous meaning, and I'm hoping that Councillor Noonan can enlighten us with that. Thank you.
Is there a speaker in favour of the motion? Councillor Noonan.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, Councillor Mogg. I will be voting for the motion, because I think what has to happen is that the people living in all of those streets where their street name is going to be changed, I think that it's important that they have certainty. As Councillor Dillon very, made the point perfectly, that it's not our call. We don't get to make the name changes, and in fact, the recommendation that was put in by the Shire was to keep Callinup Road named Callinup. However, it's not our call. Landgate makes that call, and we don't get to appeal it. Our hands are tied. In response to Councillor Mogg, yes, the word Capel, which Callinup would be derived from, I believe it means Capel is home. So Callinup is literally place of home. It's home, okay, which just goes to make it an even more poignant issue, and I certainly can understand the angst felt by residents who are disappointed that their street name is going to be changed. However, once again, unfortunately, it is unavoidable, not our call.
Are there any other speakers to the item? Councillor McCleary.
I actually have a question first, which probably resolves some of the issue. The numbering system on Callinup, as it stands at the moment, starts from Bustle Highway and moves its way inland. Is that
Yes.
correct? So, okay, I've got my answer to the question. My statement is that if you were to call it Callinup, it would muck up the numbering and street addresses of all the people existing living on Callinup. Whilst that's unfortunate for those that currently have address on Bustle Highway and now they have to change their address, it's less of an impact to them than it is to those living on Callinup, and I will be voting for this.
Are there any other speakers to the item? Councillor Andrew.
Thank you. I concur. We discussed this at length on Wednesday. We were told that there's about 34 existing residents along Callinup Road, from memory, that would all have to be renumbered to accommodate the 8 houses along the front that are being moved off the address of Bustle Highway. And while there are certainly a few of those 8 that would have liked to have had their address as Callinup Road, unfortunately, I'm just not prepared to further inconvenience the additional residents who would all then have to change their mailing addresses. Unfortunately, those 8 already had to change their address. It's not any more of an impact on them, but I think, as has always been the case when it comes to items that I've had to vote on regarding the BOR, considering my particular stance on the board, it's about minimising the impact to residents, and unfortunately, that's what this officer's recommendation does. It impacts the least amount of residents negatively as possible. So I'll be voting in favour of the officer's recommendation as well.
Are there any other speakers to the item? Councillor Tarantoy, do you wish to close?
Yeah, just to summarise and thank my fellow councillors, yes, it is Glandgate. I said the wrong thing. However, the other issue that hasn't been discussed tonight was that one of the decisions one of the reasons why it has to be Grevillea and not a continuation of Callinup is also because emergency responders. It would create some confusion, possibly in the future. So that probably played into why Landgate said no as well, because they talked about duplication of a road name and then having to renumber everybody, which would be an impasse, or not an impasse, but a big inconvenience for the existing people on Cullinup. And I concur with everything that my fellow councillors have said tonight in the discussion about why this wasn't a decision that the Shire could do. It was basically the key holder is Landgate. And yeah, so I'll be voting for this amendment. For this motion. Thank you.
I'll put that item to the vote. Those in favour? And those against? And that's carried 7-1. Section 15, Community and Corporate Reports. 15.1, Accounts paid during the month of January 2023. Is there a mover for that item? Councillor Dillon, a seconder. Councillor McCleary. Councillor Dillon.
As presented, Mr. President.
Councillor McCleary. Is there any discussion on that item? No. Councillor Dillon, anything further? I'll put that item to the vote. Those in favour? That's carried unanimous. 15.2, the financial statements for the 31st of December 2022. Is there a mover for that item? Councillor Sciano. A seconder. Councillor Andrew. The Deputy President.
No, as they're written, nothing to add. Thank you.
Councillor Andrew. Any discussion on that item? Councillor McCleary.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm just looking at the year-to-date capital expenses budget versus actual on page 80. It looks like we're not going to align with budget. We're going to be quite underspent. Is that correct?
The Director of Community and Corporate.
Yes, that is correct. We will have an underspend, and the finer detail of that will be reported in the mid-year budget review workshop on the 8th of February. Sorry, March. Go back in time.
Yeah. And then that report will subsequently come to Council as well.
Thank you.
Is there anything further on that item? Councillor Terran-Troy.
Yeah, I just want to note that the Shire has term deposits maturing in March 2023 to June 2023, and the investment terms of 90 days and to 336 days, but the interest rates will be going from 2.29% to 3.94%. So that's a pretty good wicket for a term deposit. And I just wanted to highlight that this is great work by the financial staff within the Shire, and to keep an eye on our investments for building on the money that we have in the kitty to spend on the community. Thank you.
Is there anything further on that item? Councillor Scanlon, anything to close? No, I'll put that item to the vote. Those in favour? And that's carried unanimous. Item 15.3, Compliance Audit Return 2022, has been withdrawn from this evening's agenda. Item 15.4, 2022-23 Minor Community Grant Scheme Round 2. Councillor Sciano has declared an impartiality interest. And there was a further declaration from Councillor Terran-Troy, an impartiality interest. Is there a mover for that recommendation? Councillor Mogg. Is there a seconder? Councillor Terran-Troy. Councillor Mogg.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move as said or read, and nothing more to add. Thank you.
Councillor Terran-Troy.
I'd just like to note that again, this grant scheme is great. It's helping 6 of our local community organisations, which is awesome, from the Toy Library and Capel Men's Shed, Dale Up Collective, the Bunbury Horse and Pony Club, the Capel Horsepower Riding for Disabled, and also Capel Primary School PNC. So this is awesome, and this is what it's for. So yes, I think I'll be voting for this.
Is there any further discussion on that item? Councillor Mogg, do you wish to close? I'll put that item to the vote. Those in favour? And that's carried unanimous. Item 15.5, the 2021-22 annual report. Is there a mover for that item? Councillor McCleary. Is there a seconder? Councillor Andrew. Councillor McCleary.
Thank you, Mr. President. First off, I'd like to thank the staff and those people involved for preparing this report. It makes for a more interesting read in the way it's been set out. I do note that it was the budgets that were set in that were set with the previous council, but this council sitting around this table was around for most of the decisions on that. Some important things in there is the financial part. So the operating revenue for 21-20 was almost $2.25 million higher, and that was mainly due to prepayments of financial assistance grants which came into this financial year. So that covers part of it. And also, and I think we're heading the same way, is that we seem to not be able to deliver on some of the operating expenses and grants. So it'll be interesting to see where we're going, and that'll probably feed into our budgets coming forward. So apart from that, I think it's great. We'll get it out there in the community and get some feedback from a meeting, and no doubt this will be the President's first chance of fronting that meeting. Second? Righto, okay. I take that back. Number 2.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Andrew. Is there any discussion on that item? No? Anything further, Councillor McCleary? I'll put that item to the vote. Those in favour? That's carried unanimous. Item 16, new business of an urgent nature. There's nothing. Public question time. Do we have any public questions? No? All right. 18, motions without notice. There's nothing. Notice of motions for consideration at the next ordinary meeting of the Council. Councillor Clues has given notice that he intends to move the following motion at the March OCM, that the Shire of Capel henceforth ceases to support, through both funding and resources, any actions or costs related to the creation of a local government char map. We now move to item 20, items for consideration behind closed doors.
Sorry, Mr. President. Also the offsets motion. I'd like to...
Oh, sorry, Councillor. We can go back to item 19, so notice of motion for consideration next ordinary council meeting. So, yep. Councillor Noonan, you have a motion to add?
Yes, I circulated earlier a motion about offsets, seeking to create a register of private land where owners are interested in entering a joint venture with the Shire to have sections of their land given over to creating corridors for rehabilitation. And there's a series of different points relating to that. So the Shire officers are looking at that at the moment, but I'm hoping that will be ready to present the next meeting.
Thank you, Councillor. Yeah, we have that motion on record, so it'll be included in next month's agenda. Notice of items to be considered behind closed doors. We have a recommendation there that the meeting be closed to members of the public in accordance with the Shire of Capel Standing Orders Local Law 2016. Is there a mover for that item? Councillor Noonan. A seconder. Councillor Terrentroy. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried 7-1. All right, so the meeting's now closed to the public. We'll have to ask the public gallery to leave the meeting. You're, of course, more welcome to rejoin us after, but if you do decide to leave, thank you for your attendance. All right, now that the council has returned from behind closed doors, I can inform the public that the council has 1. Endorsed the establishment of a Behaviour Complaints Committee and delegates the power to resolve the complaint dated 16th of September 2022. And 2. Appoints Councillor Kitchen, Councillor Dillon and Councillor Tarantroy to the Behaviour Complaints Committee for a period ending on the resolution of the complaint dated 16th of December 2022. Which brings us to item 21, the meeting closure. There being no further business on the agenda tonight, I'll declare the meeting closed at 7:43. Thank you very much.